He fired her for speaking up. 3 months later, she owned the company that ruined her life. But before all that, there was silence. The kind that hums before a storm, before glass breaks and masks fall. Maya Carter walked into that boardroom with brilliance written in every number she'd touched, every report she'd rebuilt from ashes. She wasn't just the smartest mind in the building. She was its pulse. Yet power has a way of ignoring what it doesn't understand. Richard Vail smiled, that corporate smile, the kind that feels like an open door hiding a cliff. When Maya questioned a decision that smelled of deceit, every chair turned cold. And in that moment she realized truth had a price. One she was about to pay in full. The next morning felt like winter, even though the sun was out. Emails arrived like bullets, each colder than the last. Maya's name began to vanish. From reports, from meetings, from the very system she built. It's how power punishes the brave, not with noise, but with silence. Every smile she met felt rehearsed. Every good morning, hollow. The walls whispered betrayal, but she walked tall, refusing to shrink. Somewhere deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. It was the setup. The moment before the story turns. Richard called her in under the guise of feedback. The room smelled of expensive cologne and deceit. He spoke of attitude, of alignment with company culture. Words polished enough to hide poison. Maya listened, still, unbroken. The dismissal was written long before this meeting. Today was just the performance. And as he extended his hand with a hollow smile, Maya knew she wasn't being fired for failure. She was being erased for defiance. She packed her desk in silence. One photo, one plant, one dream, folded neatly into a cardboard box. But pain is fuel for visionaries. As the elevator doors closed, she caught her reflection and whispered something she hadn't said in years. "Watch me." And in that reflection, the fire began. Outside, the city roared like it didn't care. But Maya did. Each step echoed with quiet fury, each breath a promise. She looked up at the glass tower that cast its shadow over her, and smiled, not with defeat, but with revelation. Sometimes to rise, you must first be thrown. They said nothing when she left. Not a word, not a message, just empty desks and turned faces, pretending not to see the ghost walking out of their door. Maya's absence became a rumor, then a warning. The story was rewritten before she could breathe. Unprofessional, difficult, emotional. Labels sharp enough to cut, designed to keep her out of every door that might open next. But there's a silence that doesn't break. It listens, learns, and waits. And somewhere between anger and grace, Maya began to build a fire no one else could see. Days turned to weeks, and rejection became routine. Interviews that ended before they began, polite smiles that hid closed doors. Her resume spoke volumes, but her name told a story. People refused to read. Racism doesn't always scream. It whispers through phrases like, "Not the right fit." Yet through it all, Maya never begged. She studied every silence, every snub, until she could hear the truth between the lies. Power wasn't given. It was taken, crafted, earned in the shadows of those who tried to erase her. Richard's empire grew fatter with greed, his name plastered across magazines and panels, praised for diversity initiatives built on hypocrisy. In interviews, he smiled when speaking of equal opportunity. He never mentioned Maya, but her ghost haunted every award he accepted. His success became her motivation. The sharper the spotlight on him, the deeper her determination to tear down the stage itself. Ava Brooks found her first. The journalist with ink in her veins and fury in her eyes. She saw through the silence, through the company's polished facade. Over coffee and rain, Maya spoke. Not as a victim, but as a strategist. Every lie Vail told would soon have a counterweight: evidence, precision, truth. The plan wasn't revenge. It was resurrection. And Ava, with her words sharp as glass, would make sure the world finally saw the woman they buried. That night, Maya walked past the tower again. The same one that once loomed over her, now just another building made of glass and lies. She didn't see failure anymore. She saw blueprint lines, cracks forming where arrogance had settled too deep. For the first time in months, she smiled, whispering to herself, "You built the weapon when you underestimated me." And in that quiet revelation, the fall stopped feeling like the end. It began to sound like thunder, rolling towards something unstoppable. Revenge wasn't her first plan. Rebuilding was. But rebuilding in a world that tried to erase you takes more than ambition. It takes discipline, patience, and the kind of calm that terrifies those who wronged you. Maya disappeared from their world, working from the shadows of small, co-working spaces, late nights fueled by black coffee and quiet fury. She studied the game that destroyed her. Corporate loopholes, acquisitions, silent mergers. While they celebrated, she learned. While they slept, she strategized. Because the best revenge isn't noise, it's precision. Success started small. One client, then two. People drawn not by her name, but by her integrity. Her reputation grew quietly, like a rumor whispered in the right ears. Ava's article, still unpublished, became a loaded weapon waiting for the right time to strike. Every step was deliberate. Maya didn't just want a company, she wanted a movement. One that couldn't be silenced by prejudice or power. And though the world didn't see her rise, the numbers did. They always tell the truth. Meanwhile, Vale and Pierce began to rot from within. The same arrogance that dismissed her began to blind them. Projects failed. Clients left. Richard blamed everyone but himself. Behind closed doors, whispers of mismanagement grew louder. Maya watched from afar. Each failure a note in a symphony she was composing silently. Power, she'd learned, doesn't vanish. It transfers. All she had to do was be ready when it fell. Ava's investigation deepened. Documents leaked, recordings surfaced, each piece revealing the rot beneath Vale's empire. Corruption, discrimination, cover-ups, all meticulously built into their brand. But still, Maya waited. Because truth, when timed right, doesn't just destroy, it transforms. The silence between them was now a ticking clock, and she held every second in her hands. Then came the call, the one she'd been waiting for. A major investor, tired of Vale's arrogance, wanted out. They sought someone discreet, capable, and trustworthy. Maya didn't flinch. Her voice stayed calm, but inside lightning cracked. This was her opening, the first domino. She'd built her foundation on pain, but what she was building now, this was justice, wrapped in strategy. And as the city lights flickered against her window, she finally whispered, "It's time." When you've been silenced long enough, your voice becomes sharper than any blade. Maya's new firm, Carter Analytics, was built not on revenge, but redemption. Every client she took was one who believed in ethics over ego, truth over titles. The city began to whisper her name again, not in pity, but in awe. And while Vale and Pierce laughed from their glass tower, Maya's influence quietly climbed through the cracks beneath them. She didn't roar. She recalibrated the sound of power. Numbers began to shift. Slowly, then suddenly. Clients once loyal to Vale and Pierce started signing with Carter Analytics. Reports spread of accuracy, transparency, integrity, words long foreign to the old empire. Richard dismissed it as luck, as noise. But the board saw what he didn't. Maya was becoming a force no PR statement could contain. It wasn't personal anymore. It was systemic correction, written in every spreadsheet she touched. Ava finally struck. The article hit headlines like thunder, Behind the curtain, racism and corruption inside Vale and Pierce. It named names. It exposed lies. And right there in the middle of it all, Richard Vale's legacy began to crumble. Maya didn't celebrate. She watched quietly, sipping her coffee as her phone buzzed with news alerts. The truth was finally public. But her revenge wasn't about exposure, it was about evolution. Investors fled. Board members panicked. The tower that once gleamed with arrogance began to crack under its own weight. And in that chaos, Maya moved swiftly, quietly, decisively. She acquired small firms, merged networks, and built alliances Vale never saw coming. Every deal was a chess move, every signature a checkmate in progress. Richard Vale had spent years building an empire of silence. Maya was now rewriting its language entirely. Then came the day the world noticed. Carter Analytics overtook Vale and Pierce in quarterly performance. The news broke like an earthquake. Headlines, interviews, disbelief. And when Richard was asked on live television about Maya Carter, his smirk faltered for the first time. He didn't know it yet, but the woman he fired was about to own the very table that once refused her seat. Justice wasn't coming. It had arrived. The storm had finally found its name. Maya Carter. Every news cycle spoke it. Every analyst dissected it. Carter Analytics wasn't just a company anymore. It was a movement built on everything Vale and Pierce had forgotten: fairness, clarity, humanity. Richard tried to fight back. Press releases, damage control, empty apologies. But the world had changed. What used to be whispered in corridors was now shouted across headlines. For the first time, his power looked smaller than her truth. Yay. Richard Vale called an emergency board meeting, his voice cracking under the weight of denial. The boardroom that once worshipped him now sat in silence. Eyes turned to screens filled with red numbers and headlines. For decades, he'd built his throne on fear. Now, fear turned its eyes on him. The empire wasn't collapsing because of a woman. It was collapsing because of arrogance. And as Richard slammed his hand against the table, the echo sounded like the end. Maya never gloated. Her victory wasn't about destruction. It was about demonstration. Every step she took was measured. Every statement crafted to uplift, not humiliate. But justice, when pure, doesn't spare the guilty. She began acquiring smaller subsidiaries linked to Vale and Pierce. One by one, dismantling the giant from the inside out. Investors who once ignored her now begged to be part of her vision. Power had switched hands, but integrity stayed where it belonged. Ava's follow-up expose landed like lightning. Recorded audio, internal memos, proof of everything Maya had lived through: dismissal, discrimination, deceit. The public outcry was deafening. Shareholders abandoned ship, regulators stepped in, and Richard Vale's name turned from authority to cautionary tale. And somewhere between justice and ruin, Maya felt something unexpected: peace. The kind that doesn't come from victory, but from vindication. By the end of that quarter, Vale and Pierce had lost nearly everything: clients, credibility, control. Richard watched the last report print in silence. The same silence he'd once used to break others. The irony was poetic. Across town, Maya prepared her next move. Not out of spite, but necessity. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about balance. The same system that silenced her would now have to answer to her. Justice wasn't loud. It was precise. And it was coming for the final crown. The day began like any other, until the markets opened. In a single morning, Carter Analytics made an offer that sent shockwaves through the industry. It wasn't just bold. It was surgical. Maya had waited for the exact moment when Vale and Pierce was weak enough to break and proud enough not to see it coming. The hostile takeover wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Every percentage point she purchased was a piece of her stolen dignity being returned. And by noon, the numbers told the story the world had been waiting for. Maya Carter now owned the empire that once destroyed her. Richard Vale watched the news from his office, disbelief carved into every line of his face. He'd always thought power was permanent, something earned once and kept forever. But power without respect is just delay before collapse. The cameras that once chased his praise now hunted his downfall. And as he stared at the headline with Maya's name above his own, he finally understood what he'd never believed. Possible the woman he silenced was now his superior. When Maya walked into the building she was once forced to leave, the air itself seemed to pause. Employees whispered her name, half in awe, half in disbelief. She didn't need to gloat. The marble floors, the glass walls, the same corridors that once echoed her humiliation now reflected her triumph. She walked straight into the boardroom, no security to stop her, no permission required. And there he was, Richard Vale, smaller now, quieter, sitting where he'd once commanded. This time, he couldn't look her in the eyes. The meeting lasted only minutes. Richard tried to talk, offering logic, excuses, half-hearted apologies. Maya listened without blinking. When she finally spoke, her voice carried years of silence, pain, and poise. "You taught me what power looks like when it forgets humanity," she said. "Now, I'll teach it how to remember." And with that, she signed the final document, transferring every last share into her control. No fireworks, no applause. Just the quiet click of a pen that sounded like history correcting itself. As Richard left the tower for the last time, cameras flashed, but no one cheered. He walked into the same city that once bowed to him, now indifferent to his fall. Maya stood by the window of the top floor, watching him fade into the crowd below. For the first time, the building didn't feel cold. It felt cleansed. She hadn't destroyed him. He had destroyed himself. All she did was turn the mirror. And in that reflection, truth finally stood taller than pride. The world wanted drama. Maya gave them dignity. In her first press conference as CEO, she spoke not of revenge or rivalry, but of renewal. "We build stronger when we build fair," she said, her voice steady as truth itself. Cameras flashed, headlines exploded, but what lingered was her calm. She didn't come to burn the system, she came to rewrite it. And for the first time in corporate history, justice didn't look like punishment. It looked like progress. Her first act as CEO wasn't about profit, it was about people. She reinstated employees who'd been silenced, promoted talent long overlooked, and built a culture where voices were no longer filtered through fear. The old guard whispered about her methods. She ignored them. Because real change doesn't ask permission, it demands integrity. Every decision she made was a ripple, undoing years of injustice, one fair choice at a time. Ava's final article told the story, not of scandal, but of survival. "The woman who rebuilt integrity," the headline read. It wasn't about corporate warfare. It was about a woman who refused to stay silent in a system designed to mute her. Maya didn't just win. She redefined what victory meant. In her story, the hero didn't shout. She listened, learned, and led. And that was what made the world listen back. Months later, the building once called Vale Tower bore a new name, Carter Hall. The plaque gleamed beneath the sun, not as a monument to triumph, but as a promise. Maya often walked those same halls in silence, remembering the day she carried a box instead of a briefcase. The pain had not vanished. It had transformed. Justice, she'd learned, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about owning it, then turning it into light. In the quiet of her corner office, overlooking the same city that once watched her fall, Maya sat with a calm smile. The skyline shimmered, a reminder that even steel bends to persistence. She didn't think of Richard Vale anymore. His name was a lesson, not a memory. What mattered now were the voices she'd lifted, the barriers she'd broken, and the legacy she'd built from injustice. Some stories end with revenge. Hers ended with redemption, because power fades, but truth, once spoken, echoes forever.